everybody. My name is Jared Silver, and I am so excited to share with you what Capuchin monkeys know that engineering leaders don't. But before we get to that, I want to tell you a quick story about pineapple, board games, and $86 million worth of Bitcoin. Early in my career, I was working for a small education nonprofit with very little funding. I was getting paid half my market rate as a software engineer in New York City just to be a part of it. And it was a constant struggle to keep the lights on. That's why I was so excited to come across this website called the Pineapple Fund. Now, the Pineapple Fund was a website proclaiming to give away $86 million worth of Bitcoin to charities like the one for which I worked. The catch was that nobody knew who was behind it, and the only way to apply was by submitting this simple 3-question form on their website. So how would we, as a tiny, no-name nonprofit, stand out from these thousands of other charities also applying for the same limited funds? Well, luckily, I happened to notice that the website for the Pineapple Fund was hosted on GitHub Pages. And at the time, any website hosted on GitHub Pages had a public GitHub repository associated with it. So I opened a pull request. And in the body of the pull request, I might have pointed out that, hey, I happen to work for a small education nonprofit, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And lo and behold, a couple days later, this anonymous Bitcoin millionaire merged the code. And that was that. Or so I thought. Over the next couple of weeks, I constantly refreshed the Pineapple Fund website, looking at all of these incredible new charities receiving grants. And then one day, when I refreshed the page, I was astonished to find our logo. And beneath our logo, the number 1 million, representing the $1 million worth of Bitcoin that this anonymous benefactor had just donated to our nonprofit. Immediately, I picked up the phone and called my executive director. Oh my goodness, have you seen the website? Oh my goodness, what does this mean for the future of our organization? And the way that he responded kind of caught me off guard. He said very dryly in a very monotone voice, yeah, maybe I can get you a board game if you want. And it took me a while to understand and unpack what happened to me in the context of this conversation. Because before this phone call, I was so deeply motivated working for this organization that I was happily getting paid half my market rate as a software engineer in New York City just so I could be a part of it. And then after this phone call concluded, I was so demotivated that I actually ended up leaving the organization only a couple months later. And in my quest to understand why I went from so motivated to so demotivated, I came across this concept known as equity theory. Now, equity theory is one of many frameworks that organizational psychologists have put together to help explain why people feel motivated or demotivated in a workplace setting. And it basically comes down to this simple idea of matching inputs with outputs. This question of, am I getting as much out of this as I'm putting into it, and especially relative to others in the organization? Am I getting as much out of this in the format of compensation, recognition, and opportunity as I'm putting into it in the form of time and energy and talent? And in my case, the answer was, well, pretty clearly not. So equity theory was largely popularized through a series of studies done by Dr. Sarah Brosnan and Dr. Franz de Waal, in which they rewarded 2 Capuchin monkeys differently for completing the same task. And you'll see in this short clip how that played out.
The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber.
Am I getting as much out of this as I'm putting into it, especially relative to others? What matters here is the perception of fairness. That first monkey was totally fine receiving a cucumber as a reward up until the point it saw its comrade receiving a far juicier and more delicious grape. So this is interesting and all, but what does this have anything to do with engineering management? Well, the thing is, as engineering leaders, we make decisions every single day about how to distribute limited resources like compensation, recognition, and opportunity amongst our teams. Who gets to present their work at the company all-hands? Who gets to own that important new project or initiative? Every decision that we make, whether we intend it or not, is scrutinized by our reports through this lens of equity theory. People are constantly judging who's getting the grapes and who's getting cucumbers. And when folks feel as though there might be an imbalance here, when people feel like their inputs and their outputs are out of alignment, they will alter their inputs to match their perceived outputs. They might work less, pay less attention to detail, or otherwise contribute less to the team. They might quit, or worse, they might stay but stop caring. Obviously, these are terrible outcomes that we do not want to affect our teams. And so, how can we prevent this? Well, luckily, the engineers on our teams are not monkeys. They are not Capuchin monkeys. They are not code monkeys. They are people. And every person has their own perceptions of what's valuable to them, their own versions of grapes and cucumbers. Things like compensation, recognition, and opportunity are important to different degrees to different people. And this presents us with a pretty interesting arbitrage opportunity, an opportunity to deeply understand what every member of our team values, and then find creative ways to maximize their grapes and minimize their cucumbers. I'm going to quickly talk through 4 tactical ways to do just this. I like to start this process before someone even joins the team officially, in the hiring process. I like to ask a question along the lines of, could you tell me about a project you've worked on in the past that you're especially proud of? And what I'm listening for in their answer is not what the nitty-gritty technical details of the project were, but rather why they were proud of it, the underlying motivation there. Perhaps they talk about the user or business impact that resulted from this work, or perhaps they touch on the technical complexity that they had to overcome, or maybe it's something to do with the increased team cohesion that resulted from such a big win as a group. From asking a question like this, you can start to develop a mental model of what this person might believe to be or perceive to be a grape. I then like to keep the conversation rolling after someone's joined the team in our ongoing one-on-ones, wherein I like to ask questions along the lines of, what was the most energizing thing for you over the past week? Or, what was most energy sapping? And by asking questions like these, you can see how this pretty neatly aligns with this framework of grapes and cucumbers. You're continuing to develop this deeper understanding of what your team members like, don't like, what they find energizing, motivating, rewarding, and what they find not so much. And in these one-on-ones, I like to use a tool I learned from Julia Evans called the brag document. And this is, as the name might suggest, simply a document for keeping track of things worth bragging about. Right? And so in my one-on-ones, my teammates write down their proudest accomplishments of the past week. And again, what I'm looking for here is not just what they're talking about, but how they're framing it. Right? So 2 teammates might both work on this same payments logic refactor, but the first engineer might write something about the increased conversion rates that they're proud of, showing that they care a lot about business impact. Whereas the second engineer might write about the same exact project, but frame it in terms of the increased resilience of the new checkout microservice, showing that they care a lot about technical architecture. Right? So again, you're just continuing to develop this deeper understanding of what your teammates find motivating and rewarding, what they think of as grapes. Final tool I want to quickly touch on is that of intentional change theory. This is a framework by Dr. Richard Boyatzis for creating positive, lasting growth in a person's life or career. And it basically comes down to 3 questions that I like to ask my teammates on a roughly annual basis in order to frame our growth conversations for that year. They are as follows. What do you aspire to in your career? Right? Who do you want to be? What do you want to be known for? What's stopping you? Right? What is preventing you from getting there? What are the gaps in your current skill set? And then finally, what can we do together as a team to collaboratively fill those gaps? Right? What are the opportunities that we can present to you in your job here to help you reach the point that you want to reach? And through doing this, you can basically invent new grapes, right? You can sponsor teammates for opportunities that specifically align with the things that they find rewarding. And what's more, as somebody who has as much context as you do, as an engineering leader within the organization, context about the business, context about the technical architecture, right, you can then invent completely new opportunities, not even just sponsoring teammates for existing ones. Right? You can bridge that gap between what the business needs and what your team wants in order to develop. You can then take it one step further. There's some work that, frankly, isn't very exciting. An example of this that for some folks, is not particularly interesting is, like fixing an old browser compatibility issue in some old version of Internet Explorer. Not the most exciting of tasks. But framed in terms of somebody's desire to become an expert front-end developer or their care about the accessibility of the web, suddenly this task takes on a whole new level of purpose. You are turning cucumbers into grapes, helping your team to find meaning in the otherwise mundane. And this is really powerful because one of the world's most prolific psychology researchers, Roy Baumeister, found that when people view their work as consistent with the broader core themes or values that they have for themselves in their lives, they derive greater meaning and satisfaction not just from their work, but also in the rest of their lives. And at the end of the day, engineering leadership isn't about monkeys or grapes or cucumbers, and it's certainly not about pineapple or board games or Bitcoin. It's about people. And it's about the value that we can try to add to their lives through our work. Helping a member of your team to succeed and flourish has to be the juiciest grape that I personally can think of. It's an honor to be able to do that for a living, and I hope that something from today's talk helps you to do so even more effectively going forward. Thank you so much.